I'm used to talking to groups of people about stuff that I know really, really, really well. And what I would generally do is make them really nervous by saying, you'll not know if I'm making what I'm saying up. So some of it I might be making up, some of it I'm not. I'll let you decide. And then people generally pay attention and try and figure out from I'm not making any of it up, generally. But it does just tend to make people a little bit nervous to start with and you pay attention. With this, I genuinely don't know what I'm talking about. and that sounds like a joke, I promise. It sounds like a joke, but I mean, because I've struggled for quite a long time to think about, it was months ago that Wendy reached out to me and said, would I do it? And of course I said yes. And then put it in my diary, forgot about it for a little while, then remembered about it when sort of the first session came up. And I came here to have a conversation with Wendy and some of the people that worked here about some other bits and pieces they wanted to talk to me about. Jotted some notes down, and then slowly but surely over time I've developed them. The first 2 sets of notes I binned because I thought, no, that doesn't make a lot of sense. And the reason I realised I was struggling with it is because I actually don't know really, really, really well how we do this. We just sort of do. And the analogy that my wife came up with, she said it's from a film. I don't know if that's true. I don't remember the quote from a film. But she said that if you ask there's a quote in the film that says, if you ask a submarine captain how deep his submarines can go, he actually doesn't know until he does it. And I actually don't know how I started to do it. There's not a point in time that I can say, from this point, I became impartial or non-partisan. It wasn't the day I joined the office of the clerk, because I remember that day really well. I've been with the office of the clerk for 15 years. And I started on the 1st of September 2008. And within a few weeks of starting, Helen Clark called an election. So I joined the Select Committee office. Helen Clark called an election. I didn't do any work till February. And it took, in all that time, everybody was doing what they always do in the office of the clerk. We become very quiet in the office of the clerk during what's called the interregnum period, that period between the dissolution of Parliament and it restarting again. So there wasn't a point in time I can say I went through some sort of training period and they taught me about impartiality and click, off we went. And it's that I've really struggled with in thinking about what it is to talk to you about. So rather predictably, I started with, well, tell them who the hell you are, is normally a good place to start. So I'm James Picker. I'm the clerk assistant in the office of the clerk. Always sounds like the beginning of an AA meeting. But it's not, promise. And then my mind immediately goes to, well, people don't know what that is. So tell them. And the office of the clerk is the secretariat for the House of Representatives. There are 2 precinct agencies, as we describe ourselves, legislative branch agencies. The Office of the Clerk and the Parliamentary Service. Parliamentary Service is our sister organisation and takes care of what I would lovingly describe as all the corporate things that help MPs be MPs. The Office of the Clerk does everything that you don't see that makes Parliament tick as a legislature, as a branch of government whose responsibility it is to make and amend the laws. So we're really, really good, and this is why people don't know who we are, at not being visible. You're not really supposed to know who we are. You're not supposed to see what we do. In fact, if you see what we do, beyond my boss, the clerk of the House, standing up every day at 2 o'clock and reading out a list of things that's happened so that members know they've happened, something's probably gone wrong. And that's, we try to avoid that where we can. Impartiality or non-partisanship, I'm going to use those 2 terms reasonably interchangeably, so, feel free to judge me as you see fit. That is just ingrained in who we are and what we do. So it's really, really difficult for me to articulate to you, but I'm going to try, and then I'm going to try to tell you why I think we do it as well as we do. Because I would argue that my colleagues in New Zealand do non-partisan or impartial almost better than anywhere else. The key place that I would start is the differential between apolitical and non-political. We do a lot of, because Parliament is such an archaic place, most people don't have an awful lot of knowledge or experience about it. We run quite a lot of education courses, run quite a lot of development for public servants and for all manner of other people. And one of the things that I will, depending on what subject I'm talking to them about, I will talk to them about the difference between apolitical and non-political. Apolitical is what I would describe as the public service. It's a bad analogy, but I use it anyway. If you work in a public service department and you work, in my view, if you work for the most conservative or liberal minister you can possibly think of, and I'll let you think of who you're thinking of, and you are presented with providing that minister with policy options, just whether consciously or unconsciously, you're not going to provide them with the policy options that sit at the very far end of the spectrum from them. You're just not. Because they're not going to choose them. They're not going to choose them. They're going to choose from a range of policy options that represent where they sit on the political spectrum, whether you do it consciously or unconsciously. For us in the office of the clerk, non-political means I don't care consciously. I'll say the same to you as I said to you. Literally the same to you as I said to you. I don't care whether you're from the Green Party or the Ag Party, given our current political spectrum. You get the same advice. I say the same thing. Don't care what your options are. You get the same thing. It's subtle, but it's important because it overlaps a lot, in my view, with impartiality. What is it to have a Westminster style parliamentary system? Because at the root of what we'll come to in a little bit, in my opinion, about why we do it so well, is the connection between the people who work at Parliament, who are non-partisan, who are impartial, is the connection to the institution of Parliament and the work that it does in scrutinising government and holding it to account on behalf of New Zealanders. Other systems of government, I don't think, provide the same opportunity for the same connection between the people and the institution. Mainly because there is too much partisanship in their day-to-day interactions with MPs, committees, the public, social media particularly, which, let's face it, is becoming a more and more toxic place on a daily basis. But understanding what a Westminster-style parliamentary system is really foundational to what we're talking about. So what are we talking about? You're talking about a legislative branch that's responsible for making the law. You're talking about a government which is responsible for administering the laws and delivering government, and a judiciary that's responsible for interpreting the law. Democratic elections and a party that's able to secure the support of the majority of members to form a government that's accountable to Parliament, a head of state that's separate from the head of government. That's a really important one. And an independent, non-partisan public service. 5 key features of a Westminster-style democracy. Right at the heart of what we do every day. A lot of that, however, is nice and sort of fluffy and theoretical, and that's wonderful that you have a Westminster-style parliament. But what is it really like to work at the heart of what is the most partisan physical location? Because I would argue it's far more partisan to be online these days than it is to actually be in a physical location. But the most partisan physical location in the country. It's not as unknown or unknowable as you would assume. Everybody knows who you are. Everybody knows who you are. It's a little village. It used to have its own little post office. It used to have, well, it still does, its own little cash machine. And we have our own little restaurant. And it's a little village. Everybody knows everybody. It's not quite the little village I grew up in. I grew up in a little farming village in the UK of like 400 people. There, everybody literally knew everybody because half of everybody was related to the other half. Mm-hmm. But it's not quite like that at Parliament. But it's a key feature of non-partisan that you are able to look but person in the eye, in my view. The reason why social media has become such a toxic place is because you aren't looking that person in the eye. So the ability of somebody to try to or attempt to or be successful at persuading me to do something partisan, or to indicate some sort of preference requires them to look me in the face to do it. You can send me an email, but I can ignore it. It generally requires somebody to look me in the face and try to persuade me to do it. You know who I am, you know my background, you know the organisation I work for, you know what my job is, you've dealt with me on a day-to-day basis, week-to-week basis, you know why I'm there, you know what I'm, pretty decently, if you're an MP or an MP staff member, what I'm for and what my role is. And then you've got to make a decision to come and look me in the eye and try to convince me to do something different. We're relied on very, very heavily for advice, support, guidance, and discretion. I've never met an MP who turns up at Parliament and just knows how the place works. To be entirely frank with you, a lot of MPs turn up on their first day and they are very, very tired. They've been through an entire election campaign, and on the Monday after the election, we fly them down from wherever they live. They get a phone call on Sunday morning from one of our colleagues at the Parliamentary service and are told, here's your flight number, see you tomorrow. And we fly them from wherever they are, and they come down, and we give them P cards, and we give them laptops, and we give them offices, and we talk to them about all the corporate side of what they've got to do. And they do a bunch of workshops in that first week to develop as MPs and set the foundation for being an MP, predominantly from a corporate perspective. And then we send them away. They do some party stuff too. We let them meet their other MP colleagues and stuff, but that's not as important. Then they got to go away again for a week, sleep, because they've probably not slept very much for a while. And then we bring them back, and then we teach them about Parliament. And we teach them how to speak in the House, how to use microphones, what is a select committee, what is it to be sworn in, how does the state opening work, what's the legislative process. And there's a lot of MPs who know chunks, they know bits. Maybe they've seen Question Time, they've been to a select committee, they've been on a council, they know some bits and pieces of it, and then it's about linking it all up together. We have very heavily relied on all those bits of the process they don't know how to do. How do I get from A to C? They might know B that sits in the middle. How do you link it all together? So right out of the gate, you're developing a relationship with people. They know who you are. They know what questions to ask you. They know you as a conduit. You're the front door through which they can get advice. Even if you're not the answer to the question, you know where to go. And they see you day after day after day. And you build a relationship. And we become reliable source of advice and assistance. So that impartiality becomes just ingrained in every day. It's just every day. And it comes back to what I was saying at the beginning. You're going to hear me say this quite a lot. It just is part of who we are. And there isn't a single day that just clicks on and away we go. But for the MPs who we do talk to about this, who do know something about Parliament and want to learn and develop with us, and we do development with, and that's quite a lot of them, to be fair to them, they understand that if you cannot trust what I say, if I give you cause to question why I'm providing the advice, if you think the advice I'm providing you has a political bent and is because of what I believe, not what you believe or what you want to achieve, why would you trust me? Why would you follow my advice? Why would you ever listen to me? If you don't think I agree with you, you wouldn't. You'd never come and talk to me. I'm basically dead in the water as a resource for MPs to get to do what they want to do. It just becomes a natural part of our everyday engagement with MPs and something that they continually rely on. It's so central and core to engagement that you two, I'm going to pick on you two. You sat in the front row. I told you you would regret it. Told you would regret it. If you two are in the same political party, you ask me a question, I won't tell you what she asked me, and I won't tell you what I told her. You can come and ask me exactly the same question. This happens. You can come and ask me the exact same question 20 minutes later, and I won't start the answer with, oh, she came and asked me that earlier on. And this is what I said. You don't get to know. My advice to you is confidential. My advice to you is confidential. Now, obviously, that extends to different political parties, but even within the same party, If they come together, sure. Because you have to trust that what I've told you, I will keep to myself. And you know. Because, again, in a truly partisan environment, you might not want him to know what you asked me. You might not want him to know why it is you've come to ask me how you remove a party leader, or how you remove the chairperson of the select committee, or what is it to move a no confidence motion in the speaker. So we don't tell you. It isn't just in the giving of the advice, it's in the perception of the giving of the advice. Keep it honest. If you think I will tell him what I've told you, you never come through my front door. You never even get to my door. Why would you ask me? Because you can have no confidence that I'll tell you. One, that I would tell you what you want to hear, not what I want you to do, or that I would keep it to myself. So how could you achieve what you want to achieve if you don't know how to operate in an environment that's incredibly archaic and that you've never operated in before, and you don't know really how it operates right out of the gate? You learn a lot of stuff. That's getting worse as we see a high level of turnover in MPs and shorter terms in political careers. But why would you ever come through my front door? You never would. And as a result of which you never achieve what you want to do. And if you as an MP are never achieving what you want to do, part of what you want to do, particularly if you're in opposition, but not always, is scrutinise the government, which is right at the core of the role of Parliament, right at the core of the role of the legislature, to hold the government to account for how it spends your money. There's also the legislative scrutiny side of the work that it does, and how it scrutinises the government's policy choices, and how you contest ideas, and how you supposedly, hopefully, come to the best policy option at the end of the day. It's the role of the other members to scrutinise government, and it's government's role to put those things forward. But if you don't have a trusted source of advice on how to do that, or what you want to do, or how to get from A to C if you know a little bit about B, how do you do it? You don't do it, and you don't do it as well. And that's where we step in. My wife is a constant source of useful things to say. And if you tell her that, I'll deny it. But one of the things I was talking to her about recently was, what is it to have an opinion? What is it to be partial? And how does that align with being impartial? Because you would assume that the two things align. They're just two ends of the spectrum. And again, God bless her, she'd been watching or rewatching recently a television series called The Crown. And because she's been working from home, and she's one of these people who can work and listen to something at the same time. Do you have these people who work for you, Wendy? I have them who work for me. They put earbuds in. You put earbuds in, and you, like young people, put earbuds in, and then they'll be listening to them, thinking. I personally can't do it, but my wife's smarter than me, and she can. And she'll have the TV running in the lounge, and she'll sit at her desk in the lounge, and she's had this thing running. And she said, that's really funny, because I watched an episode of The Crown the other day, and there was a quote, and it was this, and she gave it to me. And it's, to have nothing, to do nothing is the hardest job of all. And it will take every ounce of energy that you have. To be impartial is not natural, not human. People will always want you to smile or agree or frown. And the minute you do, you will have declared a position, a point of view. And that's the one thing that you're not entitled to do. The less you do, the less you say, the less you agree, the less you smile. So much better. And I said to her, that's a really depressing description of what I do. That makes me sound hideous, like some sort of horrible automaton. And all I do is sit there very blankly focused, doing nothing, saying nothing, and thinking nothing. And she, bless her, she said, yeah. She watches me on the television occasionally, not very much anymore. The shine has gone off it, because I'm what you call a clerk at the table. So for anybody who's watched Parliament television, you'll occasionally see members bounce up and down, and they'll seek leave to table a document. And it means nothing, so I'll care, don't join. But if you go into the chamber, there's a table. It's big, dirty, great big table. And that's what it's for. Because, again, contrary to the belief of my children, who are aged 13 and 10, there was a time before the internet. And not everybody had access to everything. So you would come to Parliament with something that was maybe published in the ODT that somebody from Auckland had never seen. And you'd use it as a mechanism for asking questions of the minister, and you'd say to the House, okay, I seek leave to table a document. And you put it on the table of the House, and then all members have got access to it. That's basically the principle, but they still do it. Now they use it a little bit more for political point scoring. And you can only use it for things that are not already publicly available, because Parliament is archaic, but we know about the internet. We found about that. And you sit at the client, there's a full, like, I don't always look like this. Like, I own jeans and jumpers too. But there's tabs and a big lecture, there's a big academic gown, and on occasions a wig, and all of these kinds of things. And you go into the chamber, you don't wear the wig very often, it's made of horsehair, it's very hot. But you sit there, and it's what we describe as clerkly demeanour, blank face. Because you're not engaging. I'm not part of proceedings. I'm not to smile or to laugh or to engage, is to indicate a preference. A joke generally shared is fine. If everybody's laughing, that's okay. But if these guys are laughing at these guys, or vice versa, or these guys are laughing at somebody at the back, no. Because to indicate, to smile, to wave, is to indicate a preference, to indicate a partiality. And what would the member at the back of the chamber think, or one of the members over here think, or there, or here? If they make a joke and I laugh, or they make a joke and I laugh, it's become increasingly difficult. Well, it became increasingly difficult. I'm getting better. It was easier 3 years ago because you got used to it. Then we all had to go everywhere in a mask, and I could do whatever I wanted under the mask. I could have any facial expression I liked. All I could see was this bit. It was great. It did make seeing things easier because my glasses used to fog up, so I couldn't necessarily see what was in front of me. And there's a desk and there's paper everywhere. But the key thing that I want to get across is how, at its very core, being non-partisan, being impartial, if you take it to its very extreme, is actually really hard because it's not a human thing to do. We are a pack animal. I want you to like me, stood up here. I want you to be entertained. I want you to find it interesting. It's really unsettling to be stared at by a group of people. I get used to it. A group this size is, for me, worse than a bigger group. You give me 50, 60, 70 people, that's easier. My son, who's 13, does not agree. He's getting to that age where he's starting to be required to talk in front of people, and he thinks smaller the better. Just give me 2 people, don't give me 10. I'm like, no, go the other way, mate. It's much, much, much easier. But it's human nature to want to be liked. It's human nature to want people to engage with you and to engage with others. So it's right at its core, it's really difficult. And right at its core, you often aren't doing it. There's a smirk. There's an eye roll. There's sipping a glass of water so you don't laugh. There's looking down. There's looking over. There's do something else. Whilst a member over here who I know has a fantastic sense of humour, they stand up and they start to speak and you think, oh no. Okay, do something else, read something else. Prep for what you think might happen. So in saying to you, I don't know how we do it, it's an admission I'm prepared to make to a small group, ignore the people who are online. Often, that purest form of it, I'm not doing because I can't do it. And to try to do it would be very, very, very difficult and almost completely inhuman. We're not the automatons that my wife describes, thankfully. We can and do react.
We get a lot of questions at the minute, as an analogy, as a good description for it. We get a lot of questions at the minute from staff who want to go to local constituency meetings. The Leader of the Opposition is doing quite a lot of them at the moment as a mechanism for the public to get to know him. And I've had at least, how many, four questions in the last 10 days from staff members who have said, I'd really like to go, am I allowed to go? And although we would say to you, and I give you guys, you two picked on you quite horribly, I'll leave you alone, that you would say that, you know, you're not going to come and talk to me if you think, and et cetera, et cetera. Realistically, those two people who are going to come, they know, you know, I have I have an opinion, I have a political persuasion. The trick in being impartial is to not let it influence what it is you have to say. That's what we're really talking about. The ability to provide advice, the ability to provide guidance, the ability to undertake a function without your own personal persuasion colouring, clouding, or dictating the actions that you take. With that function, with that attempt, with that desire to provide that function, there are limitations that come to some of the actions and the freedoms that you guys all enjoy. I won't go to one of those constituency meetings. I flat won't go. They know who I am. And that comes back to the point we make at the beginning about Parliament being a very small place, everybody knowing who everybody is, everybody knowing what my function is. Even if I put those jeans and a jumper on, you know who I am. It's like I don't become a different person. You know what my function is. So what does it say to the MP who runs the constituency meeting and I turn up? So you can go. My wife could go. I won't go. Some of my staff can go. If you're in a role that is in the front line of the Office of the Clerk providing procedural advice directly to select committees or in the chamber, you can go. We respect the fact that you have a persuasion you're entitled to vote. My advice to one of those staff members, were they to ask me, none of them ever have, is I'm the same as you and I wouldn't go. They know who you are to turn up at one. Unless you're going to go to a constituency meeting for every single party who's running in the election, I wouldn't go. I'd stay away from it. I don't sign petitions. I don't make submissions to select committee. I don't get involved in some of the social campaigns my wife's involved in. I'm really careful about what organisations I engage with outside of work. Most of them are to do with civics education and kids' sport. Some plays volleyball. I don't know anything about volleyball. Really needs to play a sport, I know. There is a cost to attempting to be as impartial as it is possible to be as a human who wants to be liked, who wants to engage, who's interested in the issues. I played with the counterfactual. I was at a conference about 2 weeks ago. It's Thursday, right? Yeah, 2 weeks ago. Sitting weeks always mess me up because the days blur into one another. I never remember whether it's Wednesday or Thursday. Just a consequence of the house sits, and it's just how my brain works. But I was at a conference in Adelaide about 2 weeks ago, and I was fiddling with my notes and working on trying to think about what to do and what to say and how not to ramble, failing at that. But I decided to play with the counterfactual as a mechanism for the realities of the importance of impartiality. And it's not brilliant, it's not perfect, I'll freely concede. But I started to think, well, what if I could do some of the things I'm not allowed to do? What if I could slow down legislation? What if I decided to slow down legislation? Passed by the House. Because between first reading and select committee, between select committee and second reading, committee of the whole House, third reading, consent, there are stages that are required at the back end of the Office of the Clerk that we do that you never see that make the House tick. What if they were putting legislation through the House I didn't like? And I decided it's going to take me a few weeks to get to. Maybe it takes me a few weeks to get to and the House gets dissolved on the 8th of September and you don't pass it. Or if I was to show favour based on my political opinion, maybe I'd provide you advice, but maybe not so much for you. Or vice versa. What if I shared the advice I gave to you with you, and suddenly you know she's coming for your job?
What happens to you? What if I exercise my powers for evil? What would that do, and what would that say about the state of Parliament as an institution? That's an incredibly pompous thing to say. I know it as I say it out of my mouth and it comes out, and I've rumbled it around in my head. I was thinking about it as I walked it, because it makes it sound as if the entire institution wouldn't function if I didn't do what I was supposed to do. I'm really not. There's loads of us. But what damage would it do to the public perception of Parliament as a venue through which issues are solved, ideas are contested, and policy is implemented? If you, as a member of the public, could not have confidence in, if you knew about us, the impartiality of the office of the clerk, what would that do to your confidence in Parliament as an institution? What impact would that have on electoral turnout? Would people even be interested in the result? Would it matter? Well, it doesn't matter, because you're never going to get your legislation passed anyway, because everybody that works at Parliament is of that persuasion, or everybody at Parliament is of this persuasion, and you'll never get your legislation through, so why bother? What would be the cost to social cohesion if Parliament wasn't a venue through which those things could be at least attempted, not always achieved? My notes originally, I had the word achieved, but I'm not completely convinced they are achieved, or whether you would ever want them to be, whether they're something that you just strive for as an institution to be what it aspires to be. In my view, and it is only my view, and I'm happy to be challenged on it, mainly because it means I'm having a discussion about something I'm really interested in, but at times of real national challenge, the Canterbury earthquakes, Kaikoura earthquakes, COVID, this isn't just because I'm English, but it does say the death of the Queen. I appreciate that's not everybody's cup of tea, but or coffee. For me, the importance of Parliament is best demonstrated in those times. It becomes an institution to which we all look to. How many of you watched Parliament's Epidemic Response Committee on the television when we were all locked down at home? It's not just Wendy, you're just not prepared. It's not just Wendy. Yeah. Funny story. The person who was running the Epidemic Response Committee, God bless her, because we'd never done it before, we'd never put it on the television before, she wanted to get as close as possible to the modem for her internet connection in case the Zoom could have cracked out, because it was new, we didn't know what we were doing. Her Wi-Fi thing was in a cupboard. So she sat in the cupboard next to the Wi-Fi thing for several weeks until we sort of figured you can probably come out. You can probably come out of the cupboard and sit at a desk and sit at the thing. Her name's Jo. She did this one person put that all together, linking what we used to do with the television channel so you could watch it, sitting in a cupboard at home, trying not to get sick. So Parliament as an institution is central to providing reassurance to people in times of real challenge. If it's not there, or you don't have confidence in it, because it doesn't operate the way you expect it to, because I've decided based on my political persuasion, or people like me have decided based on our political persuasion, you can't have the thing you want. The government that you've elected doesn't get the thing it asked for, or that you asked for. You get what I decide. What does that do to social cohesion? Why does it work so well in New Zealand? We're a small country. I'm a geek for financial scrutiny. Here's the AA part of the meeting. I have an addiction. Financial scrutiny. I just find it really interesting. I can't help it. I don't know why. I just do. It's really, really interesting. That addiction to financial scrutiny and wanting to support them with that kind of financial scrutiny, wanting them to do it really, really well, wanting them to hold a government to account for how it spends money, for encouraging select committees to spend longer looking at estimates and annual reviews,
means that I am emotionally attached to the impartiality and the non-partisanship that's right at the core of what I do. Which again is part of the reason why I find it really difficult to articulate, because who can articulate the things that you are genuinely at your core really passionate about? Why do certain groups of people like volleyball? I don't know, but he does. And so I get on with it. But members know me. Members know us. You have to look at me in my face. You see my passion for something. You see how I articulate it. You see how I engage with you. It's really, really, really hard to come to me in person and try to persuade me to do something that you don't want me to do. Because I'm not going to do it. You're both in the same party. You sure? Seems to be a bit of a split in somebody's leaking to the You have to, you can send me an email. I said it at the beginning, but you have to actually come and talk to me. You have to see me. And you know me. A lot of the members have met my wife. I've worked there a very long time. We aren't a big place. I say this to people when they come and do financial scrutiny seminars. I can't help myself. I really can't. I've got a captive audience. I am going to say it. The New Zealand budget is really, really, really small by international comparisons. If you're interested in financial scrutiny, it's really not that hard to read. Pick it up and read it. Please pick it up and read it. It's only a few $billion, but read it. It's really easy to read. So if you're genuinely interested in what's happening in government and what's happening in New Zealand before you go into an election, and you want to know what the outcomes that have been achieved are, and you don't just want to rely on the information you get from political parties, one of the things that you can read is the budget. It will tell you what was spent, and it will tell you what was achieved with the money that was spent. It's thick, I'll grant you. Don't read it. Well, maybe read it before you go to bed. You'll sleep well, but it's a really good mechanism for engaging with what's going on. There you go, addiction dealt with. We have a really strong values-based culture in the organisation of the Office of the Clerk. We build our values from the ground up. We work with every single member of the team. There's only about 120 of us. For what do you think our values should be, knowing what our role is? We have a really strong link between our values-based culture and our purpose. Why are we here? What are we for? Everything that we've talked about in the last, or everything I've talked at you about and picked on YouTube for about half an hour. We recruit for character. I can't find what I do in the marketplace. It doesn't exist anywhere else. There are some skills that align maybe at a local government level, but it's different. I need to build what we call proceduralists from the ground up. I recruit for character and I teach you the rest. The last thing that's in my notes to talk to you about is why I think impartiality and non-partisanship is a really good mechanism for people to take, not just in really partisan environments like Parliament, but everywhere else. And it comes to me, it comes for me back to trust. The one thing that you as two MPs, same party, different party, in Parliament, out of Parliament, can rely on, can be guaranteed, can absolutely trust, is that I will be impartial, non-partisan. I will tell you what I think. I will tell you the same thing, regardless of what political party you're from. I will help you get from A to Z, whether you know a little bit about B or not. And on that basis, what I say can be relied on. And in 2023, how many places do you know where you can go? And that is true. Completely true. Every day, in everything I tell you. Very, very few places. And whether you're in public service or in business, that trust will keep people coming back over and over and over again. If they can trust what you say, if you will do what you say, and if what you say can be relied on, they will come back to you over and over and over. And that's right at the core of what we do. Because if they don't trust what I say, if they don't trust what I'm for, they won't come back over and over and over again. And they won't perform the function. They won't be as good at performing the function that you elected them for. But it doesn't matter. I don't know where, I think this gentleman here is an architect, but that's about it. That's all I know.
work here. It doesn't matter. If the person you're engaging with, customer, whatever you call them, can trust what you say, and that you will do what you say when you say you'll do it, and that you're being entirely honest and transparent, and you have none of your own motivation beyond what they can surmise for themselves, trying to sell them something, they will come back over and over and over again. And that's right at the core of what we do and why we do it, because that's what we're for. And that's why, to me, impartiality and non-partisanship are really, really important.
James, thank you so much.
Thank you for the questions and the opportunity to talk to you.
It's just so important. And I think the challenges, and I'm now going to look at your face in TV. And I'm now that
If you see me go back to the mask, you'll know why.
I know. I really understand it and I really appreciate it. Hey, look, thank you so much for all joining us. Really amazing. And I'm going to provide some refreshments for James, and thank you very much, guys, for joining us online.